get to the starting line, not feeling myself, not feeling my best, but I'm like, I'm just going to grind it out. And worst case scenario, I finish at 26, 27 hours or whatever, but I get the belt buckle and get the hell out of Dodge, and that was kind of the mentality of like, just finish, just get it done. And on the backside of Leadville, you can finally rest.
Welcome visionaries, dreamers, and trailblazers to the Casually Ambitious podcast. I'm your host, Chase Price, and I am thrilled to embark on this journey with you. Here, we dive deep into the realms of wellness, entrepreneurship, and mindset. Let's build a life we love while loving the life we live. The adventure to a more mindful, purposeful, and casually ambitious life starts now.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to season 2 of the Casually Ambitious podcast. I'm your host, Chase Price, and I'm so excited to say that because this has been a long time coming. I was expecting this to come back early summer. And one of the things we're going to talk about today, or the primary thing we're going to talk about today, is why that didn't happen. It's the Leadville 100. And we're going to talk about what the fuck happened at Leadville. That's the question everybody's asking. That's the one that I want to dive into and give you a play-by-play. I've kind of touched on bits and pieces here and there throughout the entire process of what that looked like. But today we're going to do a deep dive into everything that kind of led up to Leadville, the spring prior, the big spring, and the 3 races prior, getting accepted and doing a bib transfer to get into Leadville, the training leading up to Leadville, the actual Leadville 100, and then ultimately the DNF and the aftermath of getting rhabdo and suffering kind of through that at the Leadville 100. So it's a long story, and we're going to dive into it. To understand what happened at Leadville, we have to go back to early 2024 into kind of January and even into December of 2023 and look at the spring that I had built up. So let's take it back. Okay, let's take it back to December of 2023. December of 2023, I decided, you know what? I want to have a big spring. I want to do a really big spring with 3 different style races. So at this point, I had known that I was going to do Boston. I had got accepted to Boston. Boston was going to be my A race, right? So I reached out to my coach. We got a plan going starting January 1st. We were going to run Boston, and I was going to try and PR. So my current PR is 244, and the Boston PR I was going for was going to be 240. So that was the goal. And then I started to get intrigued by a couple other races and started to add to the spring. Okay, so I had heard about Badwater, Cape Fear Badwater, 50 miler. And what intrigued me about this race was that if you won, you would get an automatic bid or acceptance to Badwater 135. Now, you guys have probably heard of Badwater 135, probably made most famous by David Goggins. That's always been my dream race. That's been the one that I've kind of been chasing and interested in since I got into ultra running. So to see an opportunity of a race that was put on by the exact same race director, Chris Kosman, he puts on that one. He puts on Salton Sea. And if you look on the page, it says, amongst other things, there's other pre-qualifications or whatever, but I didn't read those. I looked right at the one that was like, if you win this race and you have all the other pre-qualifiers, you'll get an automatic bid and acceptance to Badwater 135. So for me, I'm like, that's it. I'm signing up. I think there's an opportunity that I can go out and do really well at this race. I don't know if I can win, but I'm going to go and try. So I put that on the calendar. So to set the scene, Boston is April 15th. That race was, I believe, March 23rd, right around that area. So March 23rd, April 15th. And then I decided to say, fuck it. You know what? Let's throw one more race into the mix. We have a 50, we have a full marathon. Let's throw a 100 mile in there just to see if we can do it. So May 10th, there was a Hellbender 100, which is in Asheville, North Carolina, 100 miler. And this is a beast, man. I think there's like 48,000 total feet of elevation gain and loss. So 24 up, 24 down. in the Appalachian Mountains on the AT, the Appalachian Trail. It's a hard race. It's a really hard race. I believe they modeled it kind of after Hard Rock 100. Now, Hard Rock 100 is significantly harder, much higher elevation gain and drop, but this is kind of a mini version of that, is how the race director described it. A lot of going up and a lot of coming right back down, back and forth, back and forth. So really challenging race. And I have done a couple hundreds, but this was going to be the most challenging up to that point. So I threw that one on the calendar as well. So at that point, the spring was set. I had, as I said, the 50 miler, March 23rd, Boston, April 15th, and then I was going to finish up with the 100 miler on May 10th at Hellbender in Asheville, North Carolina. So we start training January 1st, and again, my A race is Boston. So ultimately, the entire time we're training for Boston for the first couple weeks leading up to this thing. I have an endurance background, so I'm not overly concerned about the volume, right? Like obviously, if you're training for a 50 or 100 mile race, you want to be doing more volume than you're doing for a marathon prep. But again, my A race is Boston, so I'm training for Boston. So we go into the block the first month or two. Everything's going really, really smooth. Fitness is building. I'm getting faster. As you see week over week gains, as you usually do when you go through a marathon prep. And we get about, 2 weeks out from the 50 mile race. And I'm feeling just beat down. I'm tired. We've all felt this towards the end of a block or even in the middle of a block, is just being really fatigued. As endurance athletes, I say this kind of often, is like we get used to a good friend called fatigue just kind of following us around, right? We're used to having tired legs, going out, running on tired legs, waking up, feeling tired, just getting it done regardless. That's how I was feeling at this time in the block. And I knew I had an opportunity to potentially do well at the 50 miler. So I reached out to Casey and I was like, hey, I know that we're kind of using the 50 miler as a training run, which sounds crazy towards Boston, but I'd rather kind of take a little bit of time off before. Let's do a taper, because we didn't really have a significant taper built into it, to be honest. It was just kind of a building block as we were working towards Boston. So I said, hey, can we take a little bit of a taper here and give me a little bit of rest leading into the 50, because I think I can possibly win it. And she's like, okay, yeah, absolutely. Let's do that. And then we'll kind of take inventory on the backside of the 50 and see where we are. So that's what we did. Took a little bit of rest leading into the 50. The 50 went really, really well. I got, the first 10 miles of that race are on cart path. And let me back up. This race is in Bald Head Island, North Carolina, which is really, really badass because you have to take a ferry to get out there. There's no cars. There's no roads. You take a ferry to get out there, and then the whole island you just drive golf carts on, which is really, really cool. So we get out there. The first 10 miles of the race are on a golf cart path, and then the next, maybe it's 12 miles, and then the next 38 miles are on the beach. They're on sand. You go down and back, down and back. It's like 9 mile down, 9 mile back twice. And it's a beast. And the cool part about it was like the sand in the morning it's really, really soft because you're higher up on the beach. And then as the day progresses, the tide goes out and you can kind of get on more compact sand. So went out and got the lead right before we hit the beach. So like 10, 12, something like that. And then just held on to it the whole time. Actually, the guy ahead of me ended up taking a wrong turn. I wish that didn't happen because we would have had a really, really competitive race had that not happened. But he took a wrong turn. I took the lead from there, and I never looked back. I never saw another person the rest of the race. Really, that was challenging for the lead. So that race went really well. I won the race. And then I finished the race, go over to Chris, the race director, and I'm like, yeah, man, I'm just fired up about, 135. That's my dream race. Can't wait to run that. I guess it would be in 2025. And he's like, oh, awesome. You got all the qualifications. I'm like, I mean, yeah, I think so. He's like, you've been ultra running for 3 years right off the bat. I'm like, fuck. No, because my first one was in 2022. So it's been 2 years now. And I was like, well, no. And then he's like, you have 400s under your belt. I'm like, I will by the time 2025 rolls around. He's like, nope. So I was like 0 for 2 out of 4 of the qualifications or whatever. He's like, man, congratulations on your win here. But like, unless you have all the qualifications, you're not getting into 135. So all that to say, I didn't get an automatic bid to Badwater 135. I probably have I'm continuing to build the resume. I'm sure he'll let me in down the road. Chris is a pretty notorious guy. He sticks to his word. He's a stickler for sure. You can read about him in David Goggins' book. He mentions it too. When he was trying to get into one of his races, I think it was Badwater 135. So he lived up to his brand and to his name, which was funny, but I respect it and appreciate it. I'll continue to work towards, getting into Badwater 135. So moving forward is Boston's start to come up, right? And throwing a 50 miler right in the middle of a marathon prep, it's not ideal. It's not the best thing you could do for a marathon prep. So, we start getting 4 weeks out, which is right about when I ran the 50, 3 week. And I took a little bit of recovery after that, got right back on the track, right into marathon prep. 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out, I'm realizing like I'm having a tough time sustaining marathon pace for longer periods of time for these tempo runs, like even 8 to 10 miles at marathon pace, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 miles at marathon pace was just like really challenging. And marathon pace for me at the time was like 6:05, going for 2:40. And this is like on the Greenway too. This is like maybe a little bit of rolling hills, but Boston is notorious for the hills. So that was another thing. And I'm a little bit nervous going into Boston. I'm confident. I think that I can, will myself to 240. That's how I always think about it. That's how I go into every race is like, I believe that I can hit the goal that I want to achieve. If I have the day that I know I can have and that I know I'm capable of, I can go out there and hit my goal, as long as, I do what I got to do and stick to my game plan. So Boston comes. Boston's just a different beast. I mean, it's so totally different and contrasting from every other race I've ran of a marathon distance. They've all been so much smaller. One of the tough things about Boston is you have to go to like the athletes village with like 3 hours before the race even starts. So like you eat your pre-race meal and then you got to get on a bus and they bus you, 45 minutes to an hour away into Hopkinton. And then you just sit there for like 2 more hours and you think about the race. I was with my buddy Andy, which was nice to take my mind off a little bit, but like you bring a little snack, you're trying to hydrate, but not overhydrate. And you're in your head quite a bit leading up to that. So that's another challenge. I don't know if other majors are like that, but for Boston, that was definitely a challenge. I knew it was coming. So I was mentally prepared, but still, regardless, it was still a bit of a challenge for me. So anyway, the race starts, and right from the jump, immediately in the morning, I'm like, dude, it's hot. We had obviously been training in the winter since January 1, and here we are, April 15th, and it's like the first 70-degree day in Boston all year. It was warm out there, and I hadn't really run much in the 70s at all leading up to that. So that was the first thing that I should have probably adjusted for. And then the second thing was we start to get going. I'm ripping, I come out a little bit hot, not anything crazy. Again, my goal pace is 6:05. So I think I come out and run the first 2-3 miles and they're downhill, the first couple miles of Boston at like 5, just under 6. So 5:55, maybe a 5:53, maybe a 5:55 again. And I realize I'm not feeling like I should be feeling. On a marathon. Like I just don't feel that pop. I don't feel like that juice that you want on race day. And so right from that point, about mile 4 or 5, I should have adjusted. If I would have just adjusted then I could have saved, I probably still could have run pretty decent, like low 250s, definitely sub 3. But I didn't. I kept pushing and I was like, you know what? You're that guy. Like you are the one who can push through mentally that what other people can't. Pull from everything that you've done leading up to this. You've run hundreds. You've done so much harder things than this. You got this. You got this. You'll be able to push through. Just keep the pace, hold the pace, and see what happens. So the temperature is increasing throughout the day. And, I'm through the half marathon. I'm on pace through the half marathon, but like the race doesn't really start till you get through the half and to mile, 15, 16, where the hills start. And the hills start, and I realize like, okay, I'm in trouble. I'm definitely not holding this pace up the hills. So I do back it down off the hills. But I realize like I'm kind of burnt up already at mile 16, 17, 18, and I got a long way to go. I was not ready for the hills. Definitely did not train enough for the hills. Obviously didn't train enough for the heat. And those two things combined just kind of smacked me, like harder than I've ever been smacked in a race before. I've never walked in a marathon. I've run 100 and not walked in my first 100 before because it was flat, but never walked in a marathon before. I walked probably 5 or 6 times during this Boston Marathon. I just didn't have it that day, and I didn't back off my pace. And that's the thing that burned me, is I didn't adjust based off the conditions. And also going into that race, like my PR is 2:44 on a downhill course. Okay. And so it's a little bit naive for me to think, and I like having big, audacious, scary goals, right? But it's a little bit naive for me to have thought that I was going to hit a 2:40 on one of the hardest marathon courses out there, period. Like 2:40 on another downhill, like a CIM or something like that, like cool, doable, reasonable. A 2:40 in Boston, you got to be like, just below elite. Like you're not with the best competing for, podium or anything like that, obviously, but like you got to be pretty elite to be able to do that, especially with the conditions and the nature of the course. And so it just wasn't my day. I didn't adjust, and it ended up blowing up, like harder than I've ever blown up on a marathon, on 100, on anything. Blew up big time. Started walking a couple times, and just did not have a good day. I ended up finishing at 3:09, which was 30 minutes beyond what I wanted to hit, which is pretty crazy. Pretty crazy in hindsight. And knowing that if I would have backed off, could have still secured a good sub 3. I mean, I could have re-qualified for Boston the next year had I made some smarter decisions there. So although it didn't go my way, I love to say that it was the race that I needed, because I don't want to say cocky, but I was like overly confident going into that one, thinking I could will my way to a 2:40, and it's just not the case. So I got humbled a little bit there, which is good. We all need those races to humble our asses sometimes. So anyway, didn't do what I wanted to do in Boston, but took it with, a grain of salt, and took it with just humbling experience and like a learning experience. I wanted to use it so that would never happen to me again, right? I still want to get my Boston redemption. It's on my to-do list, but it was the race I needed at that time, right? And so I got 3 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, a couple days, whatever, maybe 3 weeks on the mark. I don't know, maybe 4, until the 100, right? And so I recover from Boston, take about 4 or 5 days to kind of rest up, recover from Boston. And then I go right back into another big weekend block of running like 31 miles in prep for this 100. And I know I'm not at 100%. It's not that I'm physically injured. It's that I'm just tired. My body's just tired. Like you just ran, one of the hardest marathons in the world. You just ran 50 miler a couple weeks before that. And now you're trying to do big miles leading up to 100. And so my body was just not happy with me. I wasn't feeling 100, and I probably went into Hellbender at like 70 or 75%, maybe. Unfortunately, that's just how it happened. And I kind of knew that when I scheduled all this out. I'm like, there's no way you're going to go out and perform like each race is your A race with this type of schedule. But I just wanted to see mentally how I could persevere through it, knowing that it was going to be a brutal gauntlet of races in 3 months there, but just seeing what would happen, how I could, adapt, what the body would do to adapt and everything. So I hit the line at Hellbender, and for the first 20 to 25 miles, I think, I'm hanging with the leaders. And that was my plan, is hang with the leaders, pace yourself, but you don't go out too hot, but hang with the leaders and just, see if you can hang around all day. And then maybe you make a push at the end or whatever it is. Still run your race. Like, don't chase anybody down. Don't do anything like that, but see what you can do and see how long you can hang with the leaders. So I did for the first 20 to 25 miles. I was in second, I think, through like 20, 25. And that's when the fatigue started to catch up with me of the last few weeks, of the last few months. And really by mile 30, I was like, dude, my quads are already burnt up. I think I had just gone up Mount Mitchell or, one of the big climbs there. I was like, damn, my legs are toast. And I got 2/3 of this race left. Like, I had not felt legs that tired ever. And I'm like, dude, you got 70 miles left. So it's going to be a long day. So you need to strap in and get ready for what's coming. And so for this race, I had a crew of my homie Dylan, who's in Casually Ambitious. He was phenomenal. Basically, he was driving to each individual aid station through the mountains of Asheville, and they were taking, hours to get to each one. Even though it would take us 6 mile run, it would be like you'd have to go 15 miles to get there from aid station to aid station. So he was chasing me down all day. My buddy Chris, who paces me for pretty much all my big races, he was going to pace me. He was going to take on, I believe, the last like 24, 25, 26 miles, something like that. And so I start losing positions as we go from mile 30 to 50. I'm dropping back to third, dropping back to fourth, dropping back to fifth. I'm like, damn, dude. How long is this going to go before I get the second win? Because you're always looking for the second win. You're like, I'm in a dark patch. This happens every 100. I know this happens. Wait for it to pass and, get that second win. Maybe it's an aid station. Maybe it's something I eat at an aid station that picks me up. Maybe it's one of my buddies I see on the course who I knew was running the race who picks me up. Maybe it's, a check-in with the guys at the aid station that picks up my mood or whatever. So I'm just waiting for that to happen. I get to mile 50 and it does happen. I pick up a little bit of steam. I mean, it's raining at this point. It's probably like 50, maybe colder, maybe 40s and raining. And it was nasty conditions, but I stopped and took about 10 minutes at this aid station, which is way longer than I usually take, and put on fresh socks. I shouldn't have put on fresh socks because I got them instantly wet again in the rain, but you're not really thinking through smart at the time. So did that. And it did rejuvenate me a little bit. I pick up the pace, I get moving again. And that lasts for about 10 miles. And then 60, I just hit the biggest wall I've ever hit in my life. And I'm like, in my head, I'm calculating like, how long is it going to take me to run this bitch home or walk this thing home? Because that's how bad I'm hurting at this time. And I walk for probably like, I don't know, maybe an hour or two at that time. And again, like I'm in a really, really dark spot, the biggest wall I've ever hit. Thinking, damn, can I still make the cutoff if I walk the rest of the way? Which I could, but the whole time I'm like, you're not that guy. You're not that guy. Like, figure it out, start moving your legs forward and pick up the pace and just see what happens. And so 65, I think I get a second wind again. And this time it's go time. Like, I feel it. I feel good. I start to run again. There's some downhills, which help me out tremendously. The second half of that race is much easier and more, you're able to run more on the second half of the race than the first. The first is a lot of hiking, climbing. The second half is much more runnable. So I start to run the downhills and I'm picking up momentum. I pick up another guy on the course that we start running together. I think his name's Andrew. I can't remember exactly. And at this time, I think I'm in like 7th, 8th, something like that. And I just pick up my second win. I'm like, finally, I got it. So ended up running probably 60% of the rest of the way. And then Chris picked me up. And once Chris picked me up, the last 20 miles, I was pretty toast, man. Like, yeah, I had gotten my second wind, but I was still like, I was out of it. And this was so much more elevation than I had ever taken on before. So that was starting to affect me. But we would jog the flats, run the downhills, things like that. And then all the uphills, we would kind of just hike from there. Chris brought me home, and it was funny because we get to the finish line. We get like 0.2 away from the finish line. We're going around this hairpin turn, and I look to my left and I see another guy. I'm in 7th place at this time. I see another guy in 8th who's like, I guess, been hauling ass down the mountain because there's a downhill at the last part. We make eye contact, and I'm like, oh shit, I gotta go. And so I take off. I feel like I'm sprinting. I feel like I'm doing 6-minute miles, 6:30, something like that. I think I was like doing like 8:30 pace, 9-minute pace, something like that. And I think he's behind me the whole time. I'm worried he's going to catch me. It turns out we made eye contact. I took off. He tried to take off and ended up just projectile vomiting. He was like done at that point. So I finished. He comes in, a couple minutes later, and ended up coming 7th in that race. And 7th wasn't what I wanted out of that race, but I was okay with it, knowing like how big my spring was, knowing how much I had just packed into that whole thing. And so I couldn't be disappointed with 7th. I pushed myself, and I found like kind of a new limit for me after finishing and pushing through and having Chris, bring me home at the end of that thing. So not an ideal finish, but I wasn't disappointed, I guess you could say. I was proud of the effort. I was proud of the effort that I put into that one. And it was a good building block for me as far as, a big race with some pretty tough elevation to work through. And I'm glad I got it under my belt. So I got that belt buckle back there, one of those suckers. So anyway, get through the 100. I'm like, breathing a sigh of relief because my spring at this point is like finally over. I can take a few weeks. But that's actually not the case, because I believe in February, March, I get a phone call, or I get a message from Heather from Ashay Pure Naturals, which is one of my sponsors. And unfortunately, a couple weeks prior to that, the chief marketing officer, Mitchell, who was also dating Heather, had passed away, unfortunately, in really surprising circumstances, kind of out of nowhere. And so a couple weeks passed, and Mitchell had actually had a bib for Leadville later that year, or this year. And Heather reached out. She said, hey, I'm curious if you would consider running in Mitchell's honor. We could do maybe a bib transfer, and you could run and take his bib and run Leadville 100. It took me all of like 0.2 seconds to say like, yes, absolutely. I mean, it would be the biggest honor of my life to run for Mitchell, run that race with him on my shoulder, and he's going to help me get up that mountain and over, and, hopefully do really well. And I said yes immediately. It wasn't even an afterthought. And so from that point, I was like, okay, we got this big spring, but right after spring, we got to get into a block and do a 3-month training block leading into Leadville. And so that's what we did. After Hellbender, I took 1 week off, which in hindsight was kind of the beginning of the end, so to speak, foreshadowing a little bit, because I should have taken what I should have done is taken a month off right after that 100 and just let my body recover, get back to baseline, get back to feeling like myself. And that's not what I did. I was way overzealous and excited to start training for Leadville. I was like, I got to do more work in the mountains. I got to go on bigger runs, longer runs, all this stuff. So there was, I guess, 12 weeks or maybe more, maybe closer to 14, 15 before Leadville. And again, I took 1 week off and went right back into the training block. And so during this training block, on paper, it was the perfect training block. Like, I actually was not working with Casey after Boston, because I was like, I want to guinea pig a little bit. I want to test some things. I want to try some things out on this 100. And then again, going into Leadville. And if it goes wrong, I just want to blame myself. I don't want to blame anybody else but myself. And it's going to give me some coaching experience I need. And so one of those things was my diet. So I had done quite a bit of research and learned we've all probably, you guys are probably familiar with the Maffetone method. You may have heard of that. His name, the doctor behind it is Phil Maffetone, or coach, I should say. And he may be a doctor. And he had worked with some elite level athletes in the past. And basically, his work with the Maffetone method is primarily focused on like the heart rate stuff and doing a lot of volume at a lower heart rate, which we're all pretty familiar with Z2. It goes hand in hand, very similar stuff. But there's also something called the Maffetone diet. And this is the part that intrigued me, because I was talking about how, and I've seen other endurance athletes do this too, is they convert from, primarily using carbs as fuel and their glycogen sources as their main primary fuels, or main primary fuel source, to a fat burning system, or using, fat as the primary fuel burning source. This intrigued me because, with glycogen, you have limited stores. That's why we hit a wall during the marathon. That's why you need to continue to eat gels and things during these races to continue to fuel you throughout. Whereas, with the fat burning system, in theory, we have unlimited fat reserves in our body that we can pull from. I mean, the limit on units, it's like 100,000 units or something. I might have just pulled that out of my ass, but essentially you become a more efficient runner because you're running on your fat storage and you're burning fat as fuel instead of burning glycogen. So you don't have to eat as much. You don't have to rely on those carbs as much. And this takes time because you're changing your diet. You're changing how you're training, right? Because you're not necessarily carb loading before your big runs. You're not maybe taking the same amount of carbs and gels during your runs that you would otherwise. And it's really tough because you're going through this block, and you're doing 2 days. For me, I was doing 2 days. I'm lifting and I'm running almost every single day. And by the time I would get to the run, I would just be so depleted, because I would, and sometimes I would take a fuel source in between the workouts, but other times I'd be like, I got to convert to this fat burning system, and the workouts are supposed to suck. Like I have to get through the suck in order to get to the other side where I'm more efficient as a fat burner. And to do that, I need to work out, not fasted, but like on a lack of carbohydrates in order to do that and have my body acclimate and start to thrive on that system. And so that's what I did kind of throughout that time. So for the first month, I stuck to what I had been doing before with the carbs. And then I learned about Maffetone. And then I started to do that towards the last 8 weeks or so of that Leadville prep. And it's easy to think something's working when you're aesthetically looking the best you've ever looked and felt before, which is where I was. I was in a little bit of a deficit as well, because I ultimately, along with that diet, I was trying to reach a certain racing weight. Some of the best ultra runners in the world are like 135, 140 soaking wet. And I sit at 185, 180. And so I'm like, okay, if I can get closer to 170, I think I'll be in a better position. Because you see these light guys, they're like bouncing up the mountain like mountain goats. And I was like, okay, I need to get closer to something like that. So I'm trying to lose a little bit of weight. I'm on this new diet and just kind of experimenting during this time. I'm trying to see if I can be a low carb, high fat burning, efficient machine. And that was kind of the test and what I wanted to put to the test during this time. And throughout this training period as well, and this is probably a huge contributor from the diet, I was just tired, like not just regular tired, like, the fatigue I was talking about earlier. We're all used to carrying around a certain level of fatigue, but this was like about 8 weeks out, I just started feeling this like deep set fatigue in my legs like I had never felt before. Like I remember there was a point about 8 weeks out where I took 2 days off because, in the middle of a block, like you don't want to take more than a day off at a time. I took 2 days off because I'm like, something's not right. I just need to get, a little bit of juice back in the legs. I just feel tired. Like I would feel it the most when I would go up the stairs at the end of the night. After a long day, I would start to creep up the stairs and I'm like, bro, I'm supposed to climb a huge mountain in a couple months and I'm just struggling to get up the stairs with how tired my legs are feeling right now. It was beyond just having like dead legs. It was just this deep set fatigue is the only way I could describe it. And I just wasn't able to recover like I usually am. Like usually, in the middle of a block, I can take 1 day off and I come back, I'm like, damn, I felt like I slept for a week. I feel amazing. I'm right back into it. And that never happened. And it's very likely because I was underfueling the entire time. Not only was I overtraining, running too many miles, but I was underfueling simultaneously, which is just simply a recipe for disaster. I definitely should have seen this coming, but sometimes we have to go through these things and be hard-headed and literally get smacked upside the head to have the realization of the mistakes we were making. And my thought process was like, let me do this and work through this fatigue. And then I'm going to take 2 weeks prior to the race to like shut everything down. I'm going to reintroduce the carb load about a week out from the race because my body's not used to the carbs, and then it's going to go off because it hasn't had carbs. And now we do have carbs, and the fatigue's going to go away. I'm going to get the pop back in my legs. And it just never happened. It never happened. But let's fast forward. So I fly out to Denver. The race is on Saturday. I fly out to Denver on Monday. And that was my version of acclimating, I guess, was to get to Denver, which is like 5,200 feet. It's a mile high city. So whatever a mile is, 52 and change. So I get out there on Monday, and then I go up to Leadville on Thursday. When the rest of my family gets in, they fly in on Thursday. We all drive up together. And then spend 2 nights at Leadville at 10,000 feet. I think it's like 10,100 or something like that, or just below Leadville. And we were actually in Copper Mountain, which is like 20 minutes away. So yeah, we get out there. I get out there, I guess, 6 days prior to start acclimating, and then race day comes. 4 a.m. start on Saturday, and even at that point, I knew that I wasn't going to have the race of my life. My goal had changed. I originally wanted to shoot for sub 20, and then I was like, okay, just shoot for sub 24. Like sub 24 would be great. I've run harder races than this in theory. Okay, I've run harder races, but not at altitude. So the altitude was kind of the X factor going into this. I was like, I've run harder races, and this is what I was telling myself in my mind. I've run harder races than this and finished, sub 24, and a couple of these other ones. I can do this. I got this. I get to the starting line, not feeling myself, not feeling my best, but I'm like, I'm just going to grind it out. And worst case scenario, I finish at 26, 27 hours or whatever, but I get the belt buckle and get the hell out of Dodge, and that was kind of the mentality of like, just finish, just get it done. And on the backside of Leadville, you can finally rest. And that's all I can remember thinking, or one of the big things I remember thinking is like, on the other side of this is rest. You get to rest and just take as much time as you want on the backside of this. Just get through the Leadville 100 and we'll figure it out from there. And that is just like such a red flag. Like there were so many red flags leading into this one. And that was definitely a big one. So anyway, start the race. And I was also dealing with a soleus issue leading up to this race. I had done a big 50-mile run 3 weeks out, which was my last like big run. And was dealing with some calf issues, some soleus issues. So I taped up my calves really, really well prior to this, and pretty much immediately as soon as we get going, my feet go numb. I'm like, oh God, it's going to be a long day. So really my feet were numb from mile 1 to about mile 12. And mile 12 is the first little check-in. It's a mini aid station. Your crew can't come, but I get to that aid station and I'm like, guys, you got to help me get this tape off. Just cut the tape off because my feet are numb. I'm struggling. So the aid station volunteers like rip the tape off. They're cutting the tape, and I get in, get out as fast as I can. And I'm okay at this point. Like I'm tired. I'm still not feeling like I'm supposed to feel at the beginning of a 100-mile race. But I'm like, you know what? You're going to figure it out. You're going to get through this. It's going to be a long, long day. Could be, coming in close to the cutoff, which is 30 hours, but like you're going to get this shit done one way or another. And then fast forward. So I get to Outward Bound, which is the first crewed aid station, I believe at mile 24. And I remember telling them, like, I was doing pretty good at that point. I think I was like maybe 65th, 70 position. But as far as my time goal, I was right where I wanted to be. I decided that I was going to tell my crew my ultimate time goal was 22 hours. So everything, all their indications of where I would be at what time were based off a 22-hour race finish, right? So they were expecting me at aid stations at certain times based off a 22-hour finish. And I was right where I was supposed to be through that period. I, tell them at that point, I'm like, damn, my calves are already hurting. Like I'm not feeling great in my calves, but I'm gonna figure this out. So leave there. And even then, like, I think shortly after that, there's this really, really long straightaway, whatever. And my thought process for this race was like, if there's anything flat or moderately flat, you're running it. I don't care how you feel, you're running the bitch. Obviously, we're going to run the downhills, but anything flat or even like a gradual uphill, we're running it. This is race day. This is different. You're putting everything you have into this. You're going to hike only on the, super steep stuff that you're not able to run. But other than that, you're running the entire day. And I remember right after Outward Bound, there's a pretty long flat section. And there was times when I literally had to start walking, and I was like mile 29, mile 30. And that's when I knew, like, hey, something's not right. Something's not right. Usually I don't have to walk until like the last marathon of something like this, and I'm already starting to have to walk. And it's not like I'm choosing to walk. It's like I have to walk because I know how much longer this race is. I'm like, if I run now, there's no way I'm going to finish this thing. I'm going to blow the fuck up. So I start walking here and there throughout that period. And then fast forward to Twin Lakes, which is mile 38, right before you go up Hope's Pass. It's the last chance to see your crew before you go up Hope's Pass. And then the next aid station is one right at the top of Hope's Pass, and then one on the backside, which is Winfield, which is the 50-mile mark. So I get to Twin Lakes, and I tell my crew, I'm like, guys, my calves are dead. We're 38 miles into this race. My calves are dead. I was still looking fairly strong at this point. Like, even looking back at the videos that I saw of myself, like, I was looking strong. I was looking good. But internally, I still knew something was wrong. And I felt like ultimately something was going to happen. I kind of had that feeling like something bad, it might happen, because I just don't feel myself. I don't feel 100% like I've felt in my other hundreds before. So I was a little bit nervous. But, I wasn't going to tell anybody that. I was just continuing to grind like I always do. So I start going up Hope's Pass, and I don't have too much trouble going up the front side of Hope's Pass. Get to that little aid station, check in, get a little something, and then I start to head down the backside of Hope's Pass. Hope's Pass is the biggest climb of the entire race. I think it gets up to like 12,000 feet and change. Don't know exactly what it is. It's pretty high. And then you go down the backside, and the backside is even steeper than the front side. So, I ran down the backside, which of course was my plan. And then there's this little runnable area right before you get into Winfield for a couple miles. And so I run down the backside and jog that last part and get into Winfield. And again, like, I'm okay, but I know something's wrong. And again, I'm like, just keep it together. Just keep pushing. Just figure it out. And so I leave Winfield, and I'm right where I'm supposed to be time-wise. I believe I came into Winfield at like hour 11, which according to my schedule was like right where I wanted to be. I didn't want to go faster in the first half than the second half. I wanted to pretty much stay even. So all things considered, I was still right where I wanted to be and on time for my time goal. And I leave Winfield, and then that last part, going back until you start to climb the backside of Hope's Pass, again, like, it's fairly runnable both ways. You can run down to Winfield and up, going back to just below where you start to climb up the backside. And I remember telling myself, like, okay, you're going to run this, and then you're going to climb the backside of Hope's Pass and, catch your breath and get a little bit of wind back there. When I tried to run that section, my legs stopped kind of responding. Like, I couldn't run anymore at that point. And again, for me, as someone who's run hundreds before, I'm like, oh man, it's just an early dark patch. You're going through one of these really bad patches a little bit earlier than maybe you wanted to, but that's exactly what's happening right now. So walk this section, hike up the backside of Hope's Pass, and then you'll get your second wind and you'll run down Hope's Pass, and everything's going to be fine. You'll figure it out. And So I walk that section. I try to pick it up a couple times to run, and the body just doesn't respond. And at this point, I started to develop a little bit of a cough. Nothing bad, but like it was just felt like something was like in my chest. And I started to get short of breath at this point too. And then shit got real when I started to climb back up, because this is the hardest climb of the entire race. It's very, very steep. I don't know the grade exactly, but it's like maybe 25-30% grade. I don't know. That could be wrong. I think that's what it is. And I could not go more than 20 seconds, 10 to 20 seconds up climbing, just hiking, like not running, anything like that, just hiking pretty slowly without having to take a break. Like I would have to grab a sapling or grab a tree on this trail so I wouldn't fall down and so I could catch my breath. And I would sit there for 30 seconds, catch my breath. I would go 10 to 20 more seconds up, have to grab onto another tree, catch my breath. And I started marking the trees as to like which ones I would grab on the way up. And all this time, I can't breathe really. Like I'm really struggling to catch my breath. And the level of fatigue I'm feeling in my legs, it's just like I have nothing to pull from. Like there's no mental reserves, there's no physical reserves, there's nothing, not a deeper well that I can go to and pull from. Like I came up, my entire, running career has been built off of like, there's always more in the tank. There's always, when you think you're done, you're only 40% of the way done. There's always something left, always something left. It's this Goggins mentality that I know so many of you probably resonate with. And there was nothing to pull from. Like I didn't have the reserves. There was nothing there. So when I would go to do that and just try to be mentally fucking tough, there was nothing there, which I had never experienced before. It's just like this deep set level of fatigue and this shortness of breath. And it started to catch up with me. And I was like, okay, I don't know what's happening, but all you got to do is just get to the top of the mountain and then we'll take inventory, because that little aid station's on the backside of Hope's Pass. So get up to the top, go down like half a mile, and you'll get to that aid station, and then we'll regroup, we'll reassess from there, but just get to the aid station. And what took me, no time to run down the first time, took me, I think, 3 hours to get back up the second time. And as I'm going back up, again, taking breaks every 20 to 30 seconds, going back up the mountain, these people are coming back past me, coming from Winfield, going up the mountain. And these are people that I had passed 2-3 hours before, buddies that I had seen on the course, an hour before. And they're passing me and they're just like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just going through it right now. I'm just going through it." I remember my buddy Jordan gave me some Coke. He was just carrying this bottle of Coke. He's like, "Here, dude, you need this more than me." And I took a sip of it and gave it back to him. Didn't do a damn thing. Like nothing was working. I was, and even all day long, like I was on top of my fueling. I was on top of my hydration, but like I just didn't have the juice. I didn't have anything left in the tank. And I was having to take breaks. I mean, there was parts of the backside of Hope's Pass where I had to sit down. I literally just had to sit down because I was so focused on catching my breath and trying to breathe that I wasn't able to really climb. I wasn't able to do much. And I'm like, don't think about time. Forget about the time. Just get up the mountain. Just get up this hardest climb. Get to the top. And right when I was, within half a mile of the top or a quarter mile of the top is when I kind of accepted that if I continue because there's plenty of hard climbs the rest of the race. Like, yes, that's the hardest climb of the race, but there's power line, there's these other sections, half pipe, that are pretty tough climbs. And even to walk up, like I was bent over at this point. Like you can see in the videos how I was like Quasimodo status, Hunchback of Notre Dame in these videos, because I couldn't support myself. I couldn't really breathe. And like right before I got to the summit, I was like, man, I probably am going to have to actually pull out of this race, I think, because I'm worried about my long-term health. And that thought had never crossed my mind before, ever in any race ever. I'd never thought about quitting. I didn't want to quit, but to me, I was like, this is more than a race. This is about my life. This is about, I'm expecting a little boy in December. I need to be smart. And I don't know what's going to happen if I continue to push through this. Realistically, like, is it possible that I finish the race? Sure. But is it also possible that I pass out and like, who knows what happens from there? Yeah, it's a very real possibility too. And so there's a difference for me between like pushing through and mentally being tough and physically having something wrong with you. And at that point I knew physically like something was not right. And so I finally, a couple hours later, finally summit Hope's Pass, get back down to that little aid station, 0.5. And again, like I told you, I was going to get to the top of the summit and then I was going to run down the rest of Hope's Pass and run all the way down to Twin Lakes is what I wanted to do. And I couldn't run. I still could not run. Even with the steep downhill, my body just wouldn't have it. I was doing this little weird trot thing. And again, like Quasimodo status, bent over, just could not run. Could not convince my legs to do it because they just didn't have anything to give. I get to that little aid station and I make a phone call to my crew and I'm like, hey guys, I've never said this before. And I said it with like tears in my eyes because it was just devastating to me. But I'm like, hey, something's wrong. I'm probably going to have to pull when I get down to you guys. I'm worried about, because there's 6 miles I had to go down to get to them from after that aid station. And there's only one way off the mountain. It's to go down. So I knew I had to do it. And I was like, maybe there's a chance I get a second win, but very unlikely considering how I'm feeling. I just don't think this is my day. I think something's off and I need to just get down to you guys. And so I hang up, and with them probably knowing that I'm going to have to pull out at, whatever that is, mile 60. Unbeknownst to me, they send Chris, my buddy, my pacer, who's going to pick me up in a little bit, up the mountain to get me. And thank God they did, because I meet him, like I said, it was 6 miles, I think, down. I go 3, he comes up 3, and then we go back down the 3 together. Thank God I had him. Not like he needed to physically support me, but just mentally support me the rest of that way. I mean, that was the longest 3 miles of my life, hands down, far and away. And again, he got some videos of that time, and I didn't realize how bad it was until I saw the videos of me just slumped over and eyes sunken in, like how bad I looked. But thank God he came and got me. And again, like getting passed by these people that I had passed now like 3-4 hours prior. And they're like, keep going. You can walk it in from here. It's all, it's all gravy from Twin Lakes. And I had just checked out. I was like, man, I could die. Like, I don't know what's going to happen at this. Like, that thought crossed my mind a couple times. Like, you could die. Is it worth it to die, like, for this race? And it was a pretty easy decision for me to think that, no, it's not. And so I finally get down to Twin Lakes, and my crew was there, and I just, hugged my mother-in-law for like a minute or so and cried a little bit. And I was like, yeah, I got nothing more to give. Like, I'm sorry I let you guys down. Of course, they're like, don't you dare apologize to us. But I'm like, I brought you guys out here. I did all this, and, I'm not going to be able to finish the race. I'm sorry. And they were like, shut the fuck up, basically. But at that point, I'm like, let's just go back to the house. Like, let me just go to sleep. Let me just rest and recover and do all this. They're like, no, like, you look bad. You look really bad. No offense, but we at least need to get you some IVs, get you looked at and check your levels and make sure you're good. So we check in with the aid station people or the medical team there, and they're like, yeah, you should go to the ER. So they convinced me, and I'm like, okay, fine, we'll go to the ER. We go to the ER, and pretty quickly into the ER, they were like, hey, thank God you came. Like, you're in really bad shape. And I have some of my outpatient documents here just to make sure I got the numbers right for some of these things. So the first thing they wanted to check was, because my primary complaint was like, I think I have rhabdo. I also can't really breathe. Like, I'm having really, really aggressive shortness of breath. So I need to get that checked out. And also just like, I'm tired. I'm more tired than I've ever been in my life. Like, my legs aren't working anymore. Something's up. So we get in there. They get me immediately kind of on an IV because they know I probably have rhabdo. They make you pee in a cup. My piss is just, dirt brown at that point, which I knew it was going to be. I probably have had minor cases of rhabdo in the past. When you run 100 miles, you're going to have like brown pee. It's just kind of happens, at least for me. I don't know about other people, but I kind of knew that was going to happen. But, obviously they checked that. The craziest thing I think going in was like my oxygen saturation and how much like oxygen you're getting into your system at that time. When I checked in, it was at 68% on room air, which is just like very dangerously low. It's supposed to be 90% and above, and mine was at 68%. I walked in there at 178 pounds also, which is interesting to note for later. But so right from the jump, like they take my levels, and my CK is unreadable. Basically, it's such a high level above what their monitor can read. They don't know what it is. They just know it's exponentially high. Their thing only went up to 16,000, and it was greater than 16,000. And then later, we rechecked it when I got to Denver. Their machine only went up to 40,000. It was above 40,000 at that point. So I have no idea how high it actually got. But you can see here is like everything underlined is abnormal, or circled is abnormal. I'm not doing a very good job of showing you, but it's about half of the things are abnormal. I'm not going to go through all of them. The big ones were kind of ALT and AST, which is liver enzymes and liver function. And the normal range for AST is 17 to 59. And mine was at greater than 22,000. The normal ALTV is 12 to 41. Mine was at 690. My normal bun is 9 to 20. Mine was at 41. Creatinine was high. Potassium was high. All these things were just really, really high. And then also with the coughing, they wanted to take a chest x-ray, which I first had actually told them I didn't want to do, but they convinced me to do it. And I'm glad they did, because they're like, yeah, you got fluid in your lungs as well, just from being at altitude. And you have a minor case of pulmonary edema, which is scary. And then they also took an EKG. And this was the scariest part, I think, for me, which is just a test of your heart to make sure your heart functioning is all good. And they told me my heart function was abnormal. My heart looked fatigued, I think is what they said. They said it's like slumping on one side. And that really scared the shit out of me, because it's my heart, and I'm a runner. So those two don't go hand in hand. So that really scared me. So ultimately they were like, hey, best thing for you right now is to get you down in elevation. We got to get you down to Denver in order to get some of these levels back to normal, or start to have these levels kind of translate back to normal. And so they're like, okay, I think we can get you a plane or a helicopter. I'm like, Jesus, is it that serious? We ended up just getting ambulance. Fortunately, God knows how costly it would have been to get a freaking plane or a helicopter. The ambulance ride is 2 hours down the mountain from 10,000 feet of elevation to 5,000 feet in Denver. And then I pretty much just stay in the Denver hospital for the next 60 hours, pumped up on IVs. They're continuing to just flush my system, get all of that out. They're doing chest x-rays. They're just making sure like I'm getting oxygen again, which I stayed on oxygen pretty much that whole time for 2.5 days, because I wasn't able to get the oxygen I needed normally, because my body just was fucked up basically. And my CK continued to be, very, very elevated, but every, 4 hours they were checking it, it would just come down ever so slightly, ever so slightly, ever so slightly. And so did all those other numbers, would ever so slightly just continue to drop. Thank God. They told me when I came in that if things weren't going better, they would have to do dialysis. Fortunately, obviously, they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to do any extreme things. And I continued to progress. And then, they pumped me full of IVs for 60 hours. And the reason I brought up 178 when I walked in was because when I left, I weighed in at 195 and it was just water weight. And I would look in the mirror and I did not recognize myself. I would look down at my body and I could not recognize myself, because I was just so pumped up and bloated with water and fluids and everything. It was crazy, crazy feeling. Did not feel or look like myself. But anyway, they released me after 2.5, maybe 3 days. Thank God. And they cleared me to fly back to Charlotte and all of that. And since then, I've been back, and I am just going to my follow-up visitations with the doctor. And crazy part is my levels still aren't where we want them to be in the normal ranges, but they're trending that way. I think like 90 to 95% of them are where they're supposed to be. There's just a couple indicators like the AST and ALT, and those things are still a little bit high, so we're working through that. CK is still a little bit high, so we're working through that. But everything is trending in the right direction, and they said, hey, you're good to go. We did another EKG. That was the most important thing too, because I told you all that was scaring me the most. And they're like, hey, heart function looks good. No abnormalities shown. Everything's good with that. And for me, that was the biggest sigh of relief of like, okay, you're good. You don't have any long-term anything with the heart. That was the biggest concern. And so just blessed to be on the other side of it and be able to now reflect and think about all the learning lessons that I picked up through this last, 9-month period. I mean, I went through most of it in the beginning, but like invaluable experience for me moving forward as an athlete, as a coach, as a content creator, so I can share with you guys this journey and all this bullshit that I tried and failed at and that didn't work. So I know what does work and how I can continue to make myself and others better in ways that do work moving forward, and advise against the things that didn't work for me, at least, may work for some people, but just, something that I wouldn't advise because I tried it myself and, have been going through it. So I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to be on the other side. I'm grateful for all the people that were there for me throughout this entire process. Like my parents-in-law, good Lord, shout out to them because they went through it with me out there in Denver, stayed out there with me. Shelly and Doug, thank you all so much for that. My incredible wife, she couldn't go out to Leadville with me because she's pregnant. She's very pregnant right now. She's in her 3rd trimester. And everything is just uncomfortable for her right now. But for the baby's health, it wasn't good to come out at elevation. So she wasn't able to come out for that. So she's at home just, worried sick, not able to do anything. And she had to go through that. And yeah, my mom has been a tremendous support system for me the whole time, my family, and just people checking in. Like all my homies who ran the race, all of them were checking in with me afterwards, have been consistently checking in with me in the weeks after. And everybody who's reached out, thank you. Thank you. I'm good. I'm happy, healthy. That's the most important thing, or getting back to where I'm 100%. Not there quite yet, but we're on the up and up. And then the last thing I wanted to kind of mention and touch on that is kind of significant is like, I built my brand on being a runner, and I'm not running right now, which is kind of crazy for me. It's unknown territory, but it's also really good because it's challenging me in new ways. It's challenging me to create new content that I haven't done in the past. It's challenging me to have different conversations that I haven't had in the past, to focus on more of the holistic side of things with some of my athletes than I have in the past. And so I'm really actually enjoying that process. And I got so burnt out with running through this whole thing in the last 9 months that I'm just, even when I get cleared, I'm not going to run until I want to run, until I crave running again, until I get that urge, like I want to go out and catch miles. I'm excited for that feeling. I haven't felt that in months and months and months. And it's a foundational piece of why I love running so much. And so I'm excited to get that feeling back and, get back to the love of running, which I know it's going to come back. I don't know if it's going to be 2 weeks from now. I don't know if it's going to be a month from now, 2 months from now. It'll certainly be probably before 2025. But even if it's not, like, what's the rush? What's the rush? There is none. And I'm in a season of my life where I'm just resting as much as I can, trying to focus and get really intentional with my health and that side of things and my diet and all these. And then just getting in the weight room again. Like, it feels good to sling some weight, not have to worry about lifting for an hour and then going to run 8 to 10 to 12 miles after that. Literally just being like, okay, I got my lifting for the day. I'm good. So it's a refreshing period of my life, actually. And it's been a great opportunity to reflect, work on things like this, the podcast, finally getting the pod out. Some of these other things I've been working on the last couple months that I'll be excited to share in the coming months as well. So that's the story of Leadville. I'm sure I skipped some parts, but that's the gist. You guys got the gist of it. And again, thank you guys for all the support you've given me throughout that period. And I'm excited to take this knowledge gained and get better from it. Use it as a pillar and as a foundation for everything else that I do moving forward, and continue to share the journey, man. That's what it's all about. My most important thing to me is always being authentic and sharing the journey. And that includes sharing the lows just as much as you're sharing the highs. And I certainly have a lot of the lows too. So I'm happy to share them so you guys don't have to experience the same things that I do. Hey, but that was a little, that was deep for first pod of season 2. I promise you the vibes are only going to go up from here, but I wanted to start out with that because, I had so many people that wanted to hear the entire story, which I hadn't really shared. So thank you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for your support. If you haven't subscribed to the pod yet, please do so. If you are listening on YouTube, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. That means quite a bit. That's really where my focus is going to be in the next couple months, is building that YouTube channel. And Spotify, if you haven't liked and subscribed on Spotify, I would appreciate that. Leave a comment if you can and let us know how much you appreciate the pod. Got some incredible guests coming up this year, guys. I cannot wait to share some of these conversations that I've had. They're inspiring, they're intriguing, and we got some badass people. So I'm excited to share them with you, and it's going to be an incredible second season. So thank you guys so much for your support, and that's the pod. See you in the next one.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please do us a favor and subscribe, like, comment, share, all of the above. We're trying to reach more people who are interested in that casually ambitious lifestyle, and you're going to help us do it. Thank you so much. Again, we appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next one.